Just going to run through a couple of bits. If you have any questions for the presenters, then please do use the Q&A function to add these throughout the presentations. If there's someone else to ask the question that you want to know the answer to, you can use the like feature so that we choose the most popular questions at the end of the slot to ask. If anyone can't access the Q&A, then please do use the chat and just put question before your question that you want to ask. And of course, you can use the chat just for comments and general conversation throughout the session. The whole session is being recorded, and you can turn on captions if you wish by clicking on the three dots or ellipsis in the top toolbar, clicking Settings, Accessibility, and then toggling the captions on. So first up today, we've got Carol Wright from the Open University and their paper on Adapting to the Generative AI Landscape, Insights from Developing Our Library Training. Thanks, Carol.
Thank you, Heather. Hi, everyone. My name's Carol Wright. I'm one of the Learning and Teaching Librarians at the Open University. And I'm going to be talking to you about a library session that we have developed on generative AI for students and some of the challenges that we came across in the process of developing this session. And there were many challenges. So first of all, just a little bit of background to the team. So at the OU Library, the Learning and Teaching Librarians, we work in a matrix structure rather than in subject teams. So there are 6 matrix areas altogether, and if you're a full-time librarian, you work on 3 of those matrix areas. And one of the matrix areas is live engagement. And the live engagement team are a team of 11 librarians who design and deliver live online training on digital and information literacy skills, or DIL skills. So these sessions include bespoke training sessions, which are designed and delivered within modules. And also we have a generic program of training sessions which are open to all staff and students. And they cover a range of DIL skills, such as we have a session on using library search, a session on database searching, referencing, and assessing the reliability of information. And the team also deliver other sessions, such as the Open University Student Association events. We also deliver things like Learning at Work Week workshops for staff. And we did actually deliver our generative AI session for staff for one of the Learning at Work Week sessions last month, and we got over 100 participants, which was really good. So what prompted us to develop a session on generative AI? So just a little bit of background to the session. So the launch of ChatGPT propelled AI into the public sphere in an unprecedented way, particularly in the context of HE, and it kind of took everybody by surprise a bit. And this sparked a proliferation of workshops, webinars, blog posts, etc., exploring the potential benefits and challenges of generative AI for learning and teaching. So myself and some other colleagues were attending events on AI, and I'm sure, like many of you, we were finding it difficult and challenging to keep up with the rapid developments. And at the same time, students also started to contact the library help desk with AI-related inquiries. So we were getting questions about whether they could use AI for their academic work. And we were also getting quite a few requests for help tracking down sources. So we'd get students contacting the help desk with references, which we couldn't find anywhere. So we suspected that we were getting quite a few hallucinated references from students, but they wouldn't ever admit it either. They were kind of a bit aloof about where they'd got these references from. So we suspect that they were coming from things like ChatGPT. And students were also asking questions about AI in our library training sessions, so particularly around how to reference generative AI outputs. And it showed that students were engaging with generative AI, and it was throwing up questions and challenges for them as well. And a group of learning designers at the Open University asked a student panel their thoughts on using generative AI and specifically ChatGPT. So that was very early this year. And this revealed students' concerns about academic integrity, the reliability and accuracy of the tools, and how reliance on the tools could negatively impact their learning. So when we put all this together, it pointed to the need for a library session to support students to develop the DIL skills, so the digital information literacy skills needed to adapt to that evolving AI landscape. But it wasn't just students though, staff also started contacting the library, and particularly the learning and teaching librarians, as a potential source of information on and guidance on AI. So AI from a skills perspective. So to create a new generic session, we needed this session to complement the other sessions we already deliver. And it was also important for us to define our specific role as learning and teaching librarians regarding generative AI from a DIL skills perspective, rather than being a go-to for all things AI. So there's already been a lot of talk this morning about what the librarian's role is within generative AI, and we felt that it was really important that we needed to define our role early, because we just didn't have, and we still don't have, the capacity to be the go-to for information on AI. And also we didn't feel like it was in our remit, or that we had the knowledge and skills to be able to do that. So we wanted to define our skills really early on. So at the same time as all this was happening, the OU was developing its guidance for students and staff on using generative AI. And we knew these guidelines would continue to evolve. So we needed the session to be able to evolve with those changing guidelines. So we decided to focus on the skills rather than the tools, as these skills can be transferred to any tool. So from a digital inclusion point of view, we also wanted to avoid promoting any particular tool in case it either disappeared or it needed to be paid for in the future. So for digital inclusion reasons, we didn't want to particularly teach students how to use any particular tool. So by concentrating on the skills rather than the tools, we felt that we could keep the session a bit more inclusive. So to put all this together, we use the OU's DIL framework, so the Digital and Information Literacy framework, to help with the design of this session. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about the framework itself. I have included a link at the bottom of the slide to the DIL framework so that you can have a look at it in more detail and see how it actually works. But I will show you how we mapped one aspect of the framework to the session that we designed. So the framework is split into 5 broad skills areas and in levels of study. Now, one of those skills areas is critically evaluate. We wanted to aim our session at level 1 students, which is our equivalent of level 4. So on the framework, under the heading of critically evaluate for level 1, we would expect the students to have the following skills. So evaluate the quality of information, evaluate digital tools, and also be able to filter. So then we looked at the session that we'd designed, and we mapped to those particular skills where we had included those within our session, so that we could see that we were on the right track with our session and it did match the DIL framework. So for the evaluate quality of information, we have an activity within the session that compares human and AI generated text. We also have a section on critically evaluating the outputs of generative AI. We also ask them to think about why you're using the tools, so evaluating the digital tools, why you're using them. Do you actually need to use generative AI? And also to have a look at the capabilities of the tools that they want to use. And under filter, we had fact check your outputs and check for bias and stereotypes. So challenges and solutions. So the session was a lot harder to design than we initially expected for lots of different reasons. our main challenge was keeping the session about the skills. So the whole point of the session was the main challenge. So keeping the session completely about the skills rather than the tools. We found that we were constantly going off at a tangent and describing how to do certain things with certain tools, and then we'd have to scrap that because we realized we weren't talking about the skills, we were talking about the tools again. So keeping it within the scope of what we'd already said the session was going to be about was really hard. Another challenge was the evolving OU guidance. So the OU guidance, as any institution, the guidance is evolving constantly, it's changing all the time. We wanted the session to very much mirror what the OU was saying in general about generative AI, but because it kept changing, we then had to keep changing the session. So it was a case of continuously checking the institutional guidance to make sure that we were on track, and we still need to do that constantly to keep the session up to date. Another problem was the rapidly evolving technologies, which also causes a few headaches. Because we were designing this session, we were trying to keep up with the latest news and development of the new tools. And that, that ended up being a full-time job at points. It was things were changing so rapidly. And again, we still need to do that to some extent to keep the session fresh and keep it up to date. We also found, and we still find, that students have vastly different levels of knowledge and confidence with generative AI. So the first session of this that we actually delivered, we only had a small number of students, but one of those students already had a master's in something AI related. So he had much more knowledge than we had, and he kept asking questions about tokens and the algorithms and things like that, and stuff that we just couldn't answer. And the other students kind of felt that they were a bit left behind because his knowledge was so great, but actually we were aiming it at those students that had no knowledge at all. So again, yes, students, the knowledge and their confidence is just all vastly different. And also related to that, we found that students and staff expectations of the training were very different. So staff very often fed back that they would like to know more about the tools and what each tool can do, whereas students wanted information on what they're allowed to use generative AI for and advice on whether they should use it or not. And we'd already set our role as learning teaching librarians as the people will teach you about the skills, but we're not going to tell you what you can and what you can't use it for, because that's up to the module teams, and module teams are all doing things very differently at the OU at the moment. So again, we don't feel that we can actually give that advice in that session, but we can give them the skills to know how to use the tools if they want to and if they're actually allowed to. Another problem that we found with this session was all of our teaching sessions include some sort of engagement, interactivity and demonstration, which we found particularly important because all of our sessions are delivered online. So this one also needed to include those things, but the challenges arose in how we were going to do that without promoting particular tools. And the answer was that we just couldn't do any of that without demonstrating. So we did make the decision to demonstrate the writing effective prompts section of the training session using Google Gemini, but we are very clear when we deliver the session that the skills that we are demonstrating can be transferred to any generative AI tool. And we don't go into any specifics about how you use Google Gemini specifically. We use it as a demonstration to demonstrate writing effective prompts. And we would also usually give students time to have a go at the thing that we're demonstrating. But in this case, we decided not to, as it would require students signing up to a particular tool. And then we felt that we were promoting a particular tool. So we decided not to have the interactivity that way. We used interactivity in the form of questions and answers in the chat and poll questions. And they also complete a comparison activity as well. And another challenge was librarians needing to develop their own skills in generative AI. So our bank of generic sessions are delivered by all 11 learning and teaching librarians in the live engagement team. And we did experience a bit of resistance to designing the session and reluctance to deliver the session, because it was something new and people's confidence levels in their own skills using Gen AI were and still are at different levels. So we did try to counteract this by delivering a staff development hour session to all library staff around generative AI. Then once we'd designed the session, we delivered a test run to library staff so that they could see how it ran and asked for feedback, and we asked them for feedback as well to see if it would give them a bit more confidence in delivering it. And there is a certain element of when you deliver this session that it's a different delivery style to that we would usually have within our generic sessions, because there's a huge element of kind of winging it when you're demonstrating, because you're not quite sure what Google Gemini is going to throw up, because it is a live demonstration. So it's very different to, for example, demonstrating a database search. So again, issues around confidence from library staff delivering this session are completely understandable, and I think by just continuously trying to share our own skills around generative AI and keeping the conversation going amongst librarians is helping a lot. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about what the session covers. I have included a link on the slide. The session is available on YouTube, but I'll just drop it into the chat as well. So you can, if you want to, watch the whole session on YouTube. So this is just a brief outline of what we cover in the session. So we cover what is generative AI and how does it work. We ask the students what experiences they have with AI, where they might use AI already in their everyday life. And the most common thing that they come up with is things like bots and things like that. We point very early to the Open University guidance on generative AI for students, and we continuously signpost back to that guidance throughout the session so that the students know that the go-to guidance for using generative AI lies with the institutional guidance and not with the library. We talk about using AI ethically and responsibly. We look at the limitations of the generative AI tools. Then we ask them to complete an activity comparing human and AI generated responses. We look at writing and refining effective prompts, and that's where we demo using Google Gemini. And then we look at critically evaluating the outputs of generative AI and also referencing and where to go for help. So that's just a brief outline of what the session covers. It's a 45-minute session, and I think we've delivered it, I think 4 times to students, but we've also delivered it to staff twice as well. So just a bit of feedback. So this is just a snapshot of the feedback that we received after the first session that we delivered in October. So it just shows that students' knowledge and skills on the subject before and after the event. So it does indicate some success with the session, as nobody felt like they had poor knowledge after the session where they did beforehand. So and a lot more people felt that their knowledge and skills were excellent or good after the event. So does indicate some success and that the students actually learned something. And again, this is just some of the free text responses. These are from all the sessions that we've delivered so far, including the staff sessions. So I've just included a few of those. So the third one down, you can see a demo was good, but perhaps something interactive would be better. So that was from a member of staff who'd attended the session. And again, we'd already decided that we couldn't make it interactive in that we couldn't ask the students in particular to sign up to a particular tool. So we decided that we weren't going to make it interactive. But again, the staff wanted it to be more interactive because they wanted it to be more about the tools, which again is where we're just trying to define our role as what we're actually going to teach as librarians in terms of generative AI. And somebody suggested that we keep up to date with the guidelines and produce amendments as the guidelines are detailed more, which I think was a very valid comment, and hopefully that we are doing that. And I knew very little going into the session, but now feel more confident in knowing the different uses and how to apply the use of generative AI in everyday life and academically. So yes, we got some really good feedback. So what's next? What we're going to do next? Well, the authoring team amongst the learning and teaching librarians, so authoring is another one of the matrix areas. We're working on a pathway of open access AI literacy activities, which will be on our Being Digital platform. And again, I've put a link to the Being Digital platform on the slide. So you should be able to access those or open access. So this pathway will consist of 5 different activities relating to generative AI, which can be done individually, or that you can do the full pathway. So we're hoping to have those completed and published in the next couple of weeks, although I think it might be within the next few days, hopefully. We have also set up a library AI working group so that we can share resources and we can update each other with any CPD that we've attended or different tools that we've used, so we can post little reviews about the tools we've used and try and keep building on each other's skills that way. And we will also be keeping ourselves up to date and the session up to date with the evolving guidance as it changes. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Carol. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, do feel free to pop them into the Q&A, or you can raise your hand and ask it verbally if you prefer. I think we might have something come through. Let me just have a look. So yeah, questions.